Okay, so let's get going. It's just after 1 o'clock. First things first. Thank you to everyone that's joining us now and who's already on. I hope everyone had a lovely weekend. Nice to see some familiar names and faces as always. Nice to see some new names and faces as well. Welcome along. Thanks for joining us today. It gives me great pleasure and it's a privilege to be joined by Jeremy Burrows. So I'm sure a number of you guys have known about Jeremy. He's one of the biggest kind of flag bearers for the EA community, and he has lots of different initiatives. He's been an EA for most of his career and worked at very senior level and had some wonderful experiences with that. He has got a book that's coming out quite soon, which I won't spoil too much about because we're going to talk about that a bit later on. And he hosts a very, very successful podcast as well. So as always, I'm not the star of the show, or our guests are, if you like. So welcome along, Jeremy. And it will be good for you to kind of give us a bit of an introduction of perhaps your early career and how things really started off for you in the EA industry.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Hey, everyone. First off, sorry if my voice sounds a little tired. It's 7 a.m. here in St. Louis, Missouri. So it'll wake up as I talk more, I guess. So I basically was an intern at an organization for probably 3 or 4 years and was playing music and kind of doing a little bit of everything. And then at one point, I don't even remember how exactly it started, but I just started doing scheduling and project management, and they kind of tagged the word assistant to my title at some point. I'm sure many of you have had similar experiences. And then I kind of did a little bit of a hybrid role for a while. And then at one point I actually officially was an assistant to someone, and then kind of did that for a year or so, got moved over to somebody else. And then I finally landed in a project management role. And so I did that for about a year. And kind of honestly, after about 10 months or so, got bored of it. I was just like, this isn't challenging. It's too easy. So I had just gotten married. This is 10 years ago, and I just gotten married, and I was like talking to my wife. I was like, this job's kind of boring. Maybe I should just quit and start my own business. Maybe. And she said, well, okay. Not something you want to hear right after you get married, I guess. So anyway, I started saying like, well, I kind of would like to be the executive assistant to the senior founding executive. But I was like, well, but they usually don't, they had a history of basically hiring proteges or interns as his executive assistant. They were cheaper and they could kind of raise them up and then move on. Well, literally the next day, I get a call saying, hey, from my current boss saying, hey, we want to kind of change your role. And I was like, okay, whatever. That happened a lot, whatever. And then they sat me down and said, hey, we want you to be the founding executive's senior EA. I was like, that's funny. I told my wife yesterday that that's what I wanted to do. So that's how I got into the actual EA to senior level role. And I did that for 6 years. And then long story short, he got fired. I decided it was time to move on to a different organization. Took like 7 months off. I had burned out. We can talk about that a little bit if you want, but I had burned out. I had, realized that I just needed a break. So I literally like sold my house, sold most of our stuff, took my wife and our two young boys, across the country, just traveled, visited family, took 7 months off. And throughout that whole process, kind of hit reset on my career and reset on my life. And I found a role with a very successful CEO who had sold his last company for almost $1 billion, but was also a really, really good guy, family man, 4 kids. Like, I had known him since before he was successful. And he said, "Hey, I'm going to start a new artificial intelligence software company. Do you want to work with me?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Heck yeah, let's do it." And so I was hired number 1 as his EA. And that was about 4 years ago, and or a little less than 4 years ago. And now we have 54 people, and yeah, so that's kind of my EA journey, at least.
Yeah, fantastic. So, so this was it. So this was. So you're still in this your particular position right now, aren't you? So you've kind of grown with the organisation. What was it like being the first hire, and what was it like kind of seeing so many new faces coming in? And were you involved in the kind of the company journey? How much have you been involved with that and helping grow the business and put different structures and procedures into place?
Yeah, so the first 10 to 14 months, I was mostly the only one there, especially the first 6 months. I was the only one there that was not a software developer.
Yeah.
And so at one point, my executive came to me and said, "Hey, I need you to run HR. I need you to run accounting. I need you to run office management. I need you to run, basically, I need to run the company while I figure out this product." And we'd go into these big sales meetings, and I'd go with him, and he'd introduce me and say, that's Jeremy, my executive assistant. He runs the company. So I basically just did HR, which I'm an introvert. I like people, but not that much.
Yeah.
And then he's like, "Here, you got to do the people stuff."
Yeah.
And then I hate math, and I'm not good at math. And he's like, "Here, you got to do the accounting." So I was like, this isn't really a good long-term fit.
Yeah.
But I was happy to help. And so I did that for the first year or so. Then we were able to hire an CFO and then an accounting manager. And so basically what it looked like, it was similar to my prior role, where I had started there when they were very small, and then when I left, they were very big.
Yeah.
But basically I'd do a little bit of everything, or anything that was needed to fill the gaps. And then as we grew and hired people to fill those gaps, I was able to kind of let go of that and become more of a true, like, senior EA.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. But I also guess having that exposure into, really pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone and having exposure into those so many different things, it kind of, it helps in the long term, doesn't it? Right? It's, it kind of, you grow new skills, and you realize there's so many other things to your bow that you can really achieve. So, it really kind of, it stands you in good stead for kind of doing bits and pieces. So what does, I know that we'll talk about all the other initiatives that you've set up, a little bit later on, and, and the real kind of flag bearing stuff, because I know a lot of people are really interested in that. What does a kind of average week look like for you? When we focus on the kind of EA bits and pieces nowadays, what would an average week look like for you?
Well, I mean, honestly, it's part of why I love the job, is there is no average week.
Yeah.
But I mean, generally speaking, it's, I sync up with my executive once a week. I'm on the leadership team with, with his direct reports. I'm on that sync every week.
Yeah.
And then really, I just ask my executive, "Hey, what's keeping you up at night? What's making you anxious? What are the top 3 things that you're worried about this week, this month, this quarter?" And then I just make sure that everything that's on my list and everything that comes to him aligns with those things. And if they don't align with those things, then I kind of push them back or decline them or avoid them. So yeah, just kind of making sure that I'm on the same page with them, and then re-shifting my to-do list, or even his to-do list, to match that.
Fantastic. And what's it like working in AI? I mean, that's that's obviously a huge business nowadays. What kind of bits and pieces are the company? Are you allowed to say much about what software they produce and bits and pieces like that?
Yeah, so AI is pretty fun. I always get the question, why are you working for a company that's basically building something to replace you?
Mm,
And I like to say that it's definitely building, like, a lot of these AI companies are building tools that are going to replace parts of my role.
mm-hmm.
But we see AI as AI plus humans, not AI
Yeah,
versus humans.
yeah,
And so we're seeing that repetitive manual tasks
mm-hmm.
are going to be handled by computers.
Yeah,
And when you look at the stuff that our tool can do automatically,
mm,
you just think like, okay, there's not a lot of people out there that enjoy doing those repetitive
yeah,
manual tasks, answering the same question over and
mm-hmm.
over and over again.
Yeah,
Like that's not what humans were made to do.
mm-hmm.
And so, we were made to be creative. We were made to solve problems. We were made to think outside the box and take care of people and be empathetic.
Yeah,
We weren't made to just sit on the phone and answer the same question or answer the same email over and over again.
yeah,
So what we've built our tool out for is basically a support automation tool,
mm-hmm.
so that when you have questions, or when your customers have questions, or your employees have questions,
Mm-hmm.
they can ask it to the AI bot.
Mm-hmm.
And if the AI bot knows the answer, it'll answer it. If it doesn't know the answer, it'll send it off to a human, which we call a co-pilot.
Mm-hmm.
And then the human will teach the answer to the bot,
Mm,
so that and then it'll follow up with the person that had the request. So
yeah,
what that does is it's an ongoing learning process.
mm-hmm.
It's a two-way learning process, though, because
Yeah,
the humans on your team get to learn what your team members and what your customers are actually asking and what they actually want to know.
mm-hmm.
And then the bot gets to learn the answers to those things, so that over
Mm-hmm.
time, the co-pilot doesn't have to answer as many and
Yeah,
can do more,
yeah,
like I said, human, hands-on, empathetic work.
yeah, fantastic. And with a lot of the audience, as you know, that kind of follow the bits and pieces that we do here are in the UK and across Europe. How have things been over the last kind of month or so over there in the States with kind of lockdowns? And I know different states have got different rulings and what have you. How's the working environment been for you guys over there and you specifically?
I mean, yeah, it's thankfully, with our company at least, we're not affected in the sense of that we
Mm.
can pretty much pick up our laptops, go home,
Yeah,
stay productive.
yeah,
But it's definitely a challenging time, and when it comes to people, companies
mm,
say, oh, I don't want to have that sales call right now, let's push
yeah,
that off. Or
yeah,
we were really close to a couple deals, and they're like, well, you need to wait and see what happens with this COVID thing.
yeah,
um, but we, that said, there are some companies that have more of a need for support right now, and so our company's actually signed some deals since COVID, because they're realizing, like we had one executive tell us, we had been trying to sell to them for probably 2 years,
mm-hmm,
and after COVID, he says, I can't afford not to hire you now,
mm,
because they're trying to cut costs, and they're like, how
mm,
do we support all these customers without
yeah,
having to double our team?
mm-hmm,
um, so yeah, I think as far as working from home, I think that I personally enjoy it.
mm,
I may never go back to the office. Don't tell my
yeah,
executive that. Uh, but but yeah, I love it. Some people don't like it. Some
mm,
people like to have the collaboration, a little more collaboration.
yeah,
I think that a lot of the times, the people that say they like to have collaboration,
mm,
they just like to have distractions, and they don't like to sit down and do their work. They like
mhm,
procrastinating.
yeah,
Um, but I think that the key has been staying connected. So we have
mm,
a weekly chat on Wednesday afternoons,
yeah,
with EAs all over the world. And we
yeah,
just say, it's like 30 minutes sharp. And we just say hi to everybody, have a
mm,
little quick 5-minute deal. And then we break up into breakout rooms
yeah,
of like 6 or 7 people, and
yeah,
they go around and introduce each other and answer a question and things
brilliant.
like that, that just
Mm,
keep us tied to other
Yeah.
other humans,
Yeah.
and then other assistants that get what we go through.
Yeah, good stuff. And I wanted to ask a question which perhaps I hadn't prepared for before, but we from the outside looking in the American kind of market, the EA role is a kind of really truly like highly respected position. With that, that's what the kind of I see from research and what have you. What we see a lot in London and the UK is a lot of EAs and PAs and admin professionals come to us and quite often say that they feel a little bit undervalued. So it would be good to get an insight of what the kind of US workforce feels about the assistant industry and the EA profession as a whole, really.
Yeah, I think that it's similar in some industries where EAs don't feel respected. I think that it really depends on the industry. It really depends on the executive. There's so many different titles. There's so many different job descriptions. You could have a job description for an executive assistant that at one company where the executive doesn't really respect assistants and they haven't, it's a lower salary. That you look at the roles and they're more of like a entry level junior office manager type role, but they call it an executive assistant. And then you could go to another company and they have a role that's called administrative assistant. And you look at the roles there and the salary and the respect they have, and that's more like a senior level EA role. So it's there's so many variables that I think that the key is knowing how to interview the people. Like if you're going in for an interview, make sure you know how to interview them to really get to the root of that. And then also different industries. So like if you're in Silicon Valley, in tech startup world, you're going to be expected to work 70 hours a week and be available 24/7. But you're also going to be able to get a higher salary and equity in a company, versus if you go to, Grand Rapids, Michigan, and you're working at a, 8 to 5, nobody works after 5 role. You don't get equity in the company. You may not get as high of a salary, but you have a life. So, there's so many variables.
Yeah, that makes sense. And from what it seems of, you and I have been in contact now for, on and off for, last 6-7 months or so, or maybe a bit longer. What I like about the stuff that you do and various other people as well is that there's some real kind of true flag bearers for the industry that we serve and what have you. Did you kind of, when you started your podcast, did you kind of, what was the backstory behind that? And you do lots of great work and shining the spotlight on the industry as a whole and give us some really good insights and advice. What was the kind of mindset behind kind of going down that road and sharing your experiences and thoughts and tips and what have you?
Yeah. So when I said I resigned and sold my house and took 7 months off, when I did all that, I basically sat down in my garage office and I was just like, how can I avoid the same kind of burnout? I didn't have a network. I didn't have I had one stream of income at the time that I just resigned from. How can I avoid making that same mistake again? So I thought, okay, but also personally, I thought, how do I avoid that scenario again? But also I thought, how do I help as many executives and assistants avoid making the same mistakes? And so that's where I kind of was like, you know what, I could just start helping executives empower their assistants. And then I can help. So I started writing, and I actually, honestly, if you look at most of my blogs, my older blogs especially, I'm writing to the executives. And so I was meeting with my executives. I didn't even know where assistants hung out. I didn't know where assistants were out online. I didn't even know there were assistant conferences. I was so under a rock. Like I literally just hung out with executives because that's what my executive did. And so I knew all these executives, but I didn't know any assistants. So I literally just started going on LinkedIn. I started reaching out to any assistant with a pulse and just said, hey, I'm an assistant.
Yeah.
I burned out. I'm trying to hit reset. I want to meet you. I want to learn from you. I want to network. And so I started blogging, started doing LinkedIn like crazy. And then it really took a couple years before it just started, I guess, my consistency. And then slowly the network started building. I started getting some opportunities to speak at assistant events. I got to come to Chiang Mai, Thailand, and Hong Kong, and Frankfurt, Germany, to speak at these different assistant events. And after a couple years of doing that, I guess maybe almost 3 years, I'd actually done podcasts before at my last job, and I had done music and audio editing. And so I'd always liked that kind of audio production world, but I didn't want to start a podcast and then just stop. So I thought, okay, I'm not going to start a podcast until I'm ready to commit to it long term. And so I finally got to the point where I said, all right, I've got enough content. I've got enough of a network, enough of passion into it to actually start it and stay consistent and keep going. So I started March 31st, I think it was, of last year. And I think I skipped 2 holiday weekends or something. But otherwise I've done a new episode every week since then. And it's been a fun project. I've been meeting a lot of great people, interviewing a lot of EA superstars, which I always learn something when I'm interviewing them. And then I hear from people saying, oh, I learned so much from this person and this person. So that's kind of how that got going.
And didn't you interview Ronald Reagan's EA? What that they were on there, weren't they? I bet that was an interesting one, wasn't it? The story behind that. And what other kind of people have you had on there?
Yeah, so Peggy Grandy was a former executive assistant to Ronald Reagan. I interviewed Monique Hellstrom, who's great. She was Simon Sinek's assistant for 10 years. Simon's the TED Talk leadership author, guru. Interviewed Oprah Winfrey's former chief executive assistant, Libby Moore. She's great. I think her episode was 55. If you guys are wanting to start with one, hers was a great one. But yeah, and then I've also, what's cool though too, is I've also interviewed a ton of EAs. And so I did a reach out one week where I was like, hey, hopped on LinkedIn. I said, hey, is any EA want to be on my show? And I had a couple EAs reach out. And I'm like, I don't know these people. I don't know if they have anything good to say, but I know they're EAs, so they know what it's like. And everybody has a story to share. And so I shared a couple of them, and a couple of them are some of my more popular episodes because they're just like, this is an EA that just has been an EA for a while, and they're just being honest and sharing their story.
Maybe perhaps a little bit more, maybe kind of a little bit more real life experience, and people perhaps kind of can relate to that, perhaps that little bit more. And I get that, why that's popular. So with the speaking gigs that you do and what have you, is there a kind of consistent message that you always kind of want to give to the EA community? Is there I know that you've obviously got lots of different topics and what have you, but what's the kind of main the main consistent message that you like to kind of pass on to the community as such?
Well, in short, it's what my shirt says. Assistants lead. So my kind of big passion is helping assistants lead well without burning out. And part of that bucket, kind of the add-on bucket, is the future-proofing part, like the AI and learning to embrace AI and really to move into the future of the role. But I'm not one of those all hustle. Like, we've got to take care of ourselves instead of, in fact, one of the 4 pillars of a leader assistant in my book is exercise self-care. And so I'm very passionate about helping assistants level up and be leaders, be proactive, be confident, but also take care of themselves and avoid burnout, because the only way you can sustain a high level long-term career as a leader assistant is if you actually take care of yourself throughout the process.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that given this week and the start of this week being Mental Health Awareness Week, I think it's something that's really important to kind of talk about and really acknowledge as well. And you know, whether people realize it or not, I think everybody kind of gets close to having these battles with inner demons and burnout and what have you. I had my own experiences a few years ago around Christmas time. So, you know, I can totally I totally get that and subscribe to that as well. What are the key things that, you know, you say about the self-care and what have you? What would be your kind of your number 1 and 2 top tips to kind of, you know, to look after yourself in that sense?
Yeah, I think the two things are self-awareness and boundaries. So self-awareness, I talk about in my book, burnout creep. So burnout and kind of the stressors that drive us to burnout. And then you have to just become more and more aware of this creep where like burnout's kind of creeping in, and then all of a sudden you're just like, what happened? So the burnout, self-awareness of just seeing those signs of burnout, seeing the signs of the stressors that might drive you to burnout, even if you're not burned out yet. And then, so self-awareness and then boundaries. So the biggest thing I did when I started my new role was like, listen, my last executive had no boundaries. He did not take days off. When he did, he was always working during his, you know, days off. And, you know, he would text me at all hours of the weekend and night for stupid stuff that was not urgent, that could have waited. But the problem is I didn't turn my phone off. I just kept responding, or I kept, it was a two-way street there. But with my new executive, I sat him down. I said, listen, I'm going to work my butt off for you. And I know there are going to be weeks where we have to work 70 hours. I know it's a startup. There's going to be crazy weeks, but in general, I basically I'm not going to respond unless it's absolutely an emergency, after Friday night at 5:00 and until Monday morning. And I'm not going to work on the evenings. And he said, well, here's what he kind of had the same experience, running this, company that he sold for $1 billion, but still ran it for a private equity firm. He basically is like, all right, here's what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say Monday nights and Wednesday nights are my work late nights. Tuesday nights, off limits. That's time with my wife, date night. Thursday nights, family night, off limits. Friday night, off limits. Saturday to Sunday, I'll have a 24-hour Sabbath where I don't check email. I don't check Slack. I'm going to be offline for 24-hour periods straight every weekend. And then I said, okay, that's perfect. So then now what I do, I kind of line it up with his, and I tell, so now my family knows, and his wife knows, like, we're not online on Tuesday and Thursday and Friday nights. We're available Monday, Wednesday night. Doesn't mean we work every Monday, Wednesday night late, but we're available, and we have that expectation, and our families know. And so the boundaries, some people may say, oh, I don't want to work Monday or Wednesday night late. That's fine. It depends on the role you're in. I'm in a startup. It's fast paced. It's crazy. There are times where we need to kind of push, but in general, I have those boundaries set up, and it's been a life changer.
Yeah. And that makes sense. And I think if you're having that conversation, look, I'm a huge believer working in recruitment. I'm a huge believer that you can say anything to anyone. And, if you kind of approach it in the right way, right from the outset, as you have, and you set those things up, the conversation was well received, and everyone's on the same page, and everyone knows where they're going. So yeah, I think it's fantastic. We touched on it earlier on. You've got a book coming out quite soon, haven't you? It's next month it comes out, doesn't it? From memory. Yeah. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that, and what the book's called, and what it's all about?
Yeah. So I'll post a link in the chat, so you guys can download the first 3 chapters for free if you'd like. But basically, it's called The Leader Assistant: 4 Pillars of a Confident, Game-Changing Assistant. And I, as I mentioned, one of the pillars is self-care. But I talk about these 4 different pillars of what I learned in that kind of 7 months off, where I kind of reflected on what I had done wrong and what I didn't want to do, and then in the coming like 3-4 years after that, I basically took everything that I learned, everything that I saw, and then what I learned from other people. I have a couple of guest authors on a couple chapters that are experts in different things, share as well. So I basically took all that, put it in here. It's kind of your practical guide, if you will, to being confident and kind of learning what those characteristics are to really lead in your role. And so I'm very excited. It comes out June 23rd worldwide. But yeah, you can download the first 3 chapters at leaderassistantbook.com.
Brilliant. Good stuff. Fantastic. We'll make sure that we'll make sure nearer the time we'll remind everybody as well, and make sure people head over to have a look at it. Just to everybody listening at the moment, I'm gonna ask Jeremy a couple more questions, but if anyone has got any questions, that I've seen one come through already, but if anyone's got some questions that they're thinking about, just pop them in now, and then we can come back to them in a second. From your perspective, you've gone from project manager, EA, got to a really, really high level, and you're still working there, plus podcast, now author. You're spinning loads and loads of different hats, which is great. What does the future look like for you? What direction are you hoping to kind of take it? Have you got a bit more of a plan of where you're thinking to go?
Yeah, great question. I think my dream is so I'm pretty bought in with my current company capacity at the AI company. I love working with my executive. I love working on the product. I love being in the AI software as a service world, and I have a lot of flexibility right now where I can kind of go in and out, where if we're really, really busy and there's a big project and I'm focused all in, like I said, I may have a 70-hour week every once in a while, but then generally speaking, I can kind of manage it. And then on those, slower weeks, I can spend more time on prepping my podcast or writing a book or whatever. And so I have a lot of flexibility to do my, my side hustle, if you will. So I'm really in a good spot. I don't want to I don't want to go anywhere else. I think in the next 5 years, I'd love it if some big company came and bought our little startup for a couple $1 billion, and then I could, focus. I could buy a house in the mountains, or really what I want to do is buy a tiny house in the mountains, small house in the mountains, and then just travel the world and help assistants kind of the rest of my life. That'd be the kind of ideal scenario, but we'll see.
Fantastic. Good stuff. And obviously we don't want to give too much away from, we don't want to give too much away from what you talk about in your book, but you've got some great experience, and you've got, you're very happy to kind of share that. What would be the one thing, and I know that it's a really difficult one to answer, but what would be the one thing that that would have told yourself a few years back, or any other executive assistant, PA assistant? What would be the number one piece of advice you could offer those guys?
I would say, two things. I would say set boundaries and always be learning. So always be learning. And the tip I would say about learning is a lot of times we like to say, oh, I'm going to do this course, and I'm going to do this class, and I'm going to do this, I'm going to go to this event, and you just like soak up all this stuff, but then you don't apply it. So you kind of lose it. So the way I like to see learning is what's the next thing in front of me in the next couple months or quarter that I really need to do, and what's something I can learn now that will help me do that better, more efficiently, at a higher level. And so I like to kind of, I'll save resources, and I'll have like a list of all these different topics and genres of things that I need to learn at some point. But then I wait until it's kind of coming down the road. Then I focus on learning that, because then I know that I'm going to actually apply what I learned
Yeah.
and I'm going to learn it and grasp onto it for more long term. So a simple example would be, back when I left my last job and I was like, okay, I need to build a website. So I spent like 4 weeks straight researching how to build a website on WordPress and watching all these tutorials and just going crazy on learning all this.
Yeah.
And the reason I did it is because I was literally building it and following the steps as I was doing it. And so it's kind of I can't remember the term, but it's like, just in time. It's like just in time training. Like that's the kind of learning that I like, because I really am able to grasp it and apply it right away.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, because if you know you've got something coming up, learn the stuff, then you can apply it straight away, rather than having all of this information and then not, as you say, applying it. And so it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense to me. Good stuff. We have some questions here that have come through, and the first one is about when the boundaries have been set and kind of working within those boundaries. The question is, do you not then get a kind of backlog of work and then get stressed out about that, and then kind of go back to square one if you're not working and there's lots of other things going on behind the scenes?
No, I mean, the way I see it is, we as assistants, we like to think that the world revolves around us. And our little worlds sometimes do revolve around us. But to really be a leader, we have to be able to set up systems and set up processes and equip those around us so that the world that we're in can run without us. And I think that, sure, there's always going to be backlog. There's always going to be a bunch of emails when you come back from vacation, but there, even God created the world, rested on the seventh day. So if literally the creator of the world had to rest, what makes us think that we don't need to rest? And what makes us think that we can't just take some time and take care of ourselves and come back? And so my whole thing is the minute that you can be okay with a backlog, that the sooner you can be okay with the backlog, the better. Because there's no way that you're going to, now you can make that backlog less by equipping others and setting up processes and planning for your time off. And I know how it is. Like you get that adrenaline rush the week before vacation, and you're trying everything you can do to prepare for every single day while you're gone so that nothing happens. And next thing you know, it's midnight the day before your vacation, and you're still trying to finish some last things. And then you get to your vacation and you crash and you get sick because your body just like shuts down. So that's why I think it's regular rhythms of doing it every week instead of just like ongoing forever. That's why I think having that 24-hour break every weekend is key. And so, yeah, I think that we just have to work like the way I like to say it is work like everything depends on you, and rest like nothing depends on you.
I like that a lot. I really like this next question, actually, because I think a lot of people in the world are kind of are having this realization, and the question reads: in these times, a lot of people have learned to do without the things that they think that they actually needed in their lives. What's the one thing that you can't actually do without?
I mean, I hate to harp on it again, but I think that I really can't do without that time off on the weekends, where I'm just shut off from my work. And my executive's spouse once said it this way. She's like, because she asked me to do something because I do personal assistant stuff too. And she asked me to do something, and she's like, is it okay if I ask you to do this? I'm like, yeah, I don't care. And she's like, you really don't care what I ask for help for, as long as I leave you alone on Sundays. And I was like, yeah, that pretty much sums it up. I'm good with whatever. I'm happy to support you. I'm happy to help, but leave me alone on Sundays.
Fantastic. Well, I'm sorry to email you yesterday in that case, Jeremy.
Oh, you're right.
I'm just thinking back to me emailing you yesterday. So look, if anybody's got any further questions, please feel free. For regular viewers of this feature, I always say if anyone wants to come off mute, that'd be great. Jackie, have you got anything that you would like to ask? Anyone? I hate to call somebody out personally, but if anyone's got anything to ask, that'd be great. Whilst Jeremy is on here.
Thanks for listening to my podcast, Marie.
And I think what we'll do is we'll put a link up to the podcast as well, so where people can kind of drill into that, and we'll put another link up for the book as well. So brilliant. Well, look, everybody's saying thank you. Everyone is, by the looks of it, very impressed with what you have to say, and I think there's some big key takeaways, and I think especially relevant to kind of kick off Mental Health Awareness Week as well. So thanks so much for your time, Jeremy. It's been great. I know it's very early there, so a huge thank you for getting up so early and talking to us, because it's lunchtime here, so everyone's probably feeling a little bit fresher than you, kind of rolling straight out of bed and having a chat. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. And I did want to say a quick thing about mental health. So my last executive struggled with a little bit with depression, and one of the things that I learned from that whole, part, and I write about this in the book, but like the whole burnout and burnout creep, is that he, part of the issue was he didn't take the vacations, he didn't take the days off, he didn't take those breaks. And so what that did was he basically kept distracting himself with work, and kept going and kept going and kept going. And then, when those times where, his dad died. So what happened was, to give you without too much, but basically his dad died. And then a few months later, he was really struggling with it because he still tried to push through instead of processing his emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when he ended up getting fired. And so all that to say, we have to be self-aware of kind of our own tendency to, whether it's mental health or stressors or whatever it is, we have to be self-aware of that and see those red flags and see that burnout creeping in, and address it before it becomes catastrophic.
I think that's really good advice. As I said, I've kind of been there myself, and working in kind of sales and what have you. It's that industry where people kind of, you push and push and push and push, and it's often quite difficult to hit the stop button, isn't it? And I'll be the first to admit that myself. So I think it's good to kind of have these forums where you can listen to people and and have that kind of wake up call within yourself. Definitely.
Yeah, and the last thing about that would be, part of the reason we do this, the root of the reason why we work so hard and we struggle to take time off, is that we get our value, we get our self-worth from our career or from our company or from our executive. And when we do that, we're willing to give up everything else to appease them, to get their approval. And so if we can dig out that root of getting our worth from our company or from our executive, then when things go bad, or when things are getting a little too crazy and they're asking too much of you, you don't feel this like deep desire to get their approval, because you're not finding your worth in them. And so what I always like to say is, kind of the best deep-rooted confidence comes from remembering that you're a valuable human being, no matter how you perform at work, and no matter what your executive says, no matter if you lose your job or keep your job. You're a valuable human being, no matter what happens at work. And I think that if we can all remind ourselves of that, then we can have that freedom to take vacation and have that freedom to stand up to our executive when they're abusing their privilege and etc. So
fantastic, brilliant. Well, look, it's amazing advice. Thank you so much for that. And on behalf of everyone that's here with us, thanks once again for giving up your time and talking to us today. Everybody seems to have really enjoyed it, so thank you so much. Thanks to everyone that's logged on to listen as well.
Yeah, thanks for joining, everyone. Reach out, feel free to say hi on LinkedIn or email me, or yeah, I'd love to hear from you. Fantastic.
Thanks so much. Enjoy your day, and everybody else, we'll see you again tomorrow. Thanks everyone.